everybody to Let's Talk. This is a series that we do of Real Talk, where we invite young people, youth champions, folks that work on community issues to come together and to have real conversation about what our city of Detroit needs. How do we make systems change? We try in these conversations to take these like big words that we use in these complicated concepts and just talk about what does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? We do that in particular with young people and with educators and community leaders, because we know at Skillman that you guys are the visionaries. You are the ones most proximate to the issues that should be designing solutions. We have a 62-year history at Skillman Foundation where we've been at times very community embedded, at times working on policy, and we're in the midst of really honing our strategy where we're doing both. We are firmly, deeply committed to Detroiters, and we're also aiming for systems change with Detroiters in the lead to make that change. Today, we are really lucky to be joined by Lieutenant Governor Garlin Gilchrist, and you actually have a commitment to young people when there's no camera there, when there's no one to see it. We've actually seen how you are and how you actually, even with our President's Youth Council, how you on your own have spent time with them repeatedly asking questions. And we know that it's a keen interest of yours, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So we have with us today two cohorts of the President's Youth Council. We have the inaugural cohort, folks that have become grant makers for Skillman, that have given over $300,000 away, that have come to the Mackinac Policy Conference and blew the doors off the place with their ideas, and one former President's Youth Council member who's become a trustee. And we have our new cohort of President's Youth Council members who are entrepreneurial and brilliant, who are artists and who are writers and are helping to change the game. So I want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. This is really for you guys to ask questions about state policy, about how young people can be involved, about equitable education systems. What does that mean? This is really your time. So I'm going to open the floor. I'm going to ask a question to get it going, but then I'm going to open the floor for your questions. And I want to invite people who rush to the mic, but then also step back. And I want to invite people that might step back to rush to the mic so that we can hear everyone's voice today. How does that sound? Does that sound okay to you?
That sounds fantastic.
Okay. Why don't you get us started even talking about what this looks like young people involved in policy and in state government. What have you seen that works, and what have you not seen?
Okay, so first of all, Angelique, thank you for having me here, and I want to thank everybody on the council for inviting me and for being engaged. It means a lot to me as a Detroiter in my childhood and currently. To see this group of empowered people representing. So thanks for being you. I encourage you to get everything you came for as far as this program and whatever you're involved in. So to your question on young people involved in state government, I guess before I start there, I want to get a sense of y'all age range in particular. So who's the youngest person in here? And you are how old? 12? Okay. And then the oldest person in the group? Yes, you are. 21. Okay, good. I appreciate that. So the other question I have is, and I think the best way to think about what useful engagement looks like is to define the term. Okay, so what does engagement mean to you? Somebody give me a definition of engagement. Pardon me? Listening, that is important. So all of those things are important to engagement. All those things are important to being effectively engaged to actually get something out of a process. That's true outside of the policymaking process. That's true in school, that's true in business, that's true in whatever you want to be involved in. One thing that I've seen, this is my first time as an elected official, but I did spend time, in my life as an advocate, in my career as a community organizer. And one thing I learned is that in order to be engaged, you have to be engaged. Let me tell you what I mean when I say that. How many of y'all have people in your lives who complain about like everything? Okay. Nothing is ever right. Nothing is ever good enough. And I know for me, it frustrates me when I hear people complain a lot, but that don't have any ideas about solutions or how to fix their problems. Well, the most effective people who engage in policy both understand what the problems are, either from their own experience, they've lived those experiences with any number of challenging issues, or they are connected with people who are living those experiences. But they also have some idea or some vision for how to fix it. Now, you can have an idea of how to fix a system without necessarily fully understanding a system. You can have an idea, though, about what it should look like, what the outcomes of that system should be. Now, your solution can be better articulated, it can be better executed, you can have a better conversation about it if you begin to understand those systems, and that's what the learning is. But really effective engagement is about bringing yourself, your experiences, the authority that comes with that to the table and saying, this is my experience and what's happening, and this is what I want to see different. And where a lot of people who engage fall apart is they don't do one of those two things. It's really that simple. As an elected official, my whole job is to have meetings with people who want things from me. And a lot of them, though, come to those meetings and don't have clear requests. They may have a problem, but haven't really thought through what they want to see that's actually different. And so to be effective, I think it's good to understand both. And that just requires thinking about it, living with it. I think all the other capable of doing that. And the leadership is shown by being part of this is obviously, I think, proof positive of it.
Thank you. There's something intimidating, though, about it. Like, I think it's a relief for me to even know that this is your first time being in state government. And so when you started, how did you figure out like where the policies are being created? Who's creating them? How are they moving through? Like, how did you decipher that?
So, it started for me, I think, way before I even thought about being an elected official. So for context, until I was 8.5, I lived at Lafayette and McDougal, like right over here. And my parents, I lived on Wood Circle. My parents were really active in our like block club, like neighborhood association. And so as a little kid, good to see you again. I saw them being involved with our neighbors, trying to confront stuff that they wanted to see that was different, whether it was like, we need to be better about picking up trash. There was a new apartment building that got built behind our street, and they wanted to see like a public art project there because it should be beautiful. And hearing people basically argue about what reality should look like. I share that because, I got exposed to that at a young age, like literally like when I'm 4 or 5 years old, about what it looks like for people to come together to come up with a community solution. I share that because all of us in our lives have witnessed people or been part of conversations where you had to work with a bunch of people to understand what you all wanted to see different collectively, and then how you were going to work toward getting it. And that's for everything from something changing on your block to a family reunion to anything in between about coming to some collective decision. So as I entered into public service, I actually had to think back about all those processes. Because again, this is a realm that's just about people and about communication and about decision making. As a policymaker, and you have the tools and levers of government, which we can go through about what those are and when they apply. But at bottom, this is about people. If you're a good listener, if you are able to think things through clearly and then communicate what your stance is, what you believe, if you're able to have your passion be productive, then you can navigate this realm just like you can navigate any other realm. So I really want to sort of lower the threshold so that people are not intimidated. because the most effective people who come and advocate for things in Lansing are not always the ones who are the most polished or the most seasoned, but they're the ones for whom their honesty comes through in the clearest way.
Thank you. We're talking about young people and policy. We're talking about demystifying state government. And we will be talking about equitable education systems and what does that even mean. So let's talk about equitable education systems. What does that mean?
Okay. So I think first and foremost, what comes to mind when you say equitable education system, underneath that, there's a premise that everyone deserves access to an education. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need to start there. Access to an education means an education that meets you where you are and that accepts you, that is able to understand what you need as an individual, and then has the resources, the funding, the personnel to be able to meet your individual needs. Because our education system is designed to be universal. Like it's in our state constitution, every child has a right to an education in Michigan. But it's our responsibility to execute upon that charge in a way that makes sure that it is actually available, accessible to every Michigan student. And that's it. And I'm talking about the public system, specifically in particular. I'm biased. I'm a public school kid. And that's important to me. I think that the equity piece comes into it by recognizing that different people have different needs. And those needs there's a wide range of them. Those needs can be, you have different financial needs, you have different, you have special extraordinary needs for how you learn. You may have experiences that you need to manage, navigate, or overcome. And so equity means that we recognize those unique situations and again, have the resources and the tools to address them. Now, certainly, Governor Whitmer and I in the last 4 going on 5 years that we've been in office have tried to change some things about the education system to make it more equitable. That started at bottom with just literally how much money that we put into the system on a per student basis and the way that money is structured. And all the research shows that we need to invest more in the education and in the districts where students are living and fighting with persistent poverty, not less. And historically, at least over the last 30 years, we've tended to invest less in those areas. And so we've tried to flip that and right that to bring equity, at least from a funding standpoint. We've made some good progress on that. I think there's still work to do. But by realizing equity in that sense, it then sets the table for us to then deal with some of those more individualized needs, some of those that were exacerbated during the pandemic. I know I have twin 4th graders in Detroit Public Schools, for example, and my kids had very different experiences of 3rd grade and of 2nd grade and of 1st grade because of the pandemic. My son needed things different than my daughter needs. So we're working to invest in supporting education professionals, students, and support staff who can meet children's individual needs. My son needs more help with his math. My daughter needs more help with science, for example, whatever that might be. Kids need more people to talk to, especially if you are, live in an environment or live in a place where there's trauma all around you. And so we're working to increase those kinds of investments. So I really think what it means is for every kid, for every family, for every household in the community, it's recognizing that your needs deserve to be met too, and that you deserve not to be left out of a public education system that's supposed to serve you.
When you all reflect on your school experiences and you think of this term, equitable education, how many of you feel like that was your experience? Eva B? Jeremiah? And so when you think of that, what is the gap between what you experienced and what you envision for yourself? Who can articulate that?
Let's just say support.
Support.
There is a lot, especially here in Detroit, we see the diaspora of our education there. It's like a popularity system. You have the Cass Kings at Renaissance, and like everybody kind of like falls below them. And what makes the difference between those schools and the MBs and the Codys and the Persians? It's just location. And that's all. And they're scattered around the city. So it really doesn't say a lot about like a specific location breeds a specific student. It's just that equitable opportunity to have the same type of programs, the same type of funding, even books, even just having the same type of plumbing in the schools that, you know, that Cody didn't have compared to a Cranbrook or a Cass, you know, just making sure that everything is the same across the line before we start looking at, you know, what type of student is, because you can obviously see the type of student that is bred from that environment. You know, like the reason we think so much about our Cass technicians is because, and the way they think is because of their environment. They can't really help that, but they've been breeded in a successful environment. And how would that look if it was around, you know, the whole landscape of Detroit? They all had that same environment. They all had that same opportunity. They all had that same textbook that wasn't missing that one key critical page for that knowledge that they need to get to the next level. So how are we making sure that first everything is the same across the playing field? And, you know, once that foundation is built, the conversation proceeds.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think you talk about two things. You talk about just resources, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that, you know, if the district has one curriculum, it shouldn't feel different than a different building, first of all. But something else you mentioned that I do think is important is just like attitude, like pride. I don't want a kid to feel bad because they go to Mumford, right? Like that doesn't make sense. And we should be able to, the equitable investments should mean that everybody should have a school that they can be proud of. And that has to do with the built environment, what the building feels like, what the grounds feel like.
And that does tie back to policy. So yeah. We are talking about resources. We're talking about how schools are funded. Mm-hmm. We are talking about infrastructure. You know, in the suburban areas, there could be a millage that's passed to get different school infrastructure. We're talking about textbooks. We're talking about pedagogy, even being able to teach in a different way. And all of these, like, how would you say some of these decisions are local and what are these decisions are based on the state?
Well, I think for public education, the resource pieces always start at the state level. So in terms of, again, monies that are allocated for public school districts, that's where that starts. And so on some things I'm describing, for example, facilities, grounds. So the state has appropriated money directly and specifically for these purposes. We were able to draw down a lot of money from the federal government in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic for deep investment in these things. Now, the districts have to create plans and then execute on them for what that looks like at the hyper-local level. But the allocation of the funds, based on how many students you have, is coming from the state. So it's up to us to be able to make sure that there's more there and that there are more sort of, there's clearer guidance on what those funds should be, how those funds should be invested. And so that's a piece of it. And then our policy choices that are made, you know, districts have the ability to write curricula that is then submitted for approval to Michigan Department of Education. My wife worked at DPS for 4.5 years and wrote the social studies curriculum, for example. We'll rewrote social studies curriculum. That citizen handbook, that was the thing she wrote. And so how we try to think about it at the state level from a policy standpoint is to have districts that, as long as you meet the standards, that you can teach within the context that makes sense for your students. And we certainly are bucking the trend we've seen nationally with silliness around, rejecting the truth about our history, racism in our history.
Thank you for saying that.
That's something that we haven't accepted here in the state of Michigan. And so I think our role, the state's role, if you think about state government and sort of the differences between sort of state government or the federal government, state government, local government, I think the best way to think about it is I see my role as, our responsibility is creating the conditions for people to be successful, creating the conditions for communities to thrive. So while I may not be dictating from the state level a specific thing that happens in this school building, I do need to make sure that this school building has what it needs to be successful and to make a good decision. And you get the distinction I'm making. So the choice that we have to make are about what all do we need to do? What do we need to invest in? What policy need to be in place so that success can be more available, more achievable, more possible for more people? And then, we do trust. We trust that then those at the local level, whether that's city government, whether that's the school board that's elected, that then they will be good stewards of these public resources, and that there will be a framework that they can work in from a policy standpoint. That works.
Yeah.
It's a quick question. Just in a room full of grant makers, what role does philanthropy play in supporting and for ensuring that equity is in education across the board? Because I know government moves a little slower than philanthropy does. For people in philanthropy, they would say, but the government can't. So what are ways that philanthropy can be interjected, especially youth voice, in regards to that? How can that show up?
The fact that philanthropy and government have different appetites for risk is a good thing. It means that they can play a complementary role to one another to solve problems. I think that the goal of philanthropy at its best is also to create the conditions for success, and also to try to fill in gaps that may exist from where, public sector or private sector resources are not able to go. Private sector resources may not go there because it doesn't make business sense. Public sector resources may not get there because it hasn't gotten there yet or something like that. So I think, one, effective philanthropy needs to have a very clear understanding of the status of public investment, to understand what the priorities are from the public sector, to know, again, where there are opportunities that they're not addressing because of maybe, again, it's because of a sequence, because of deprioritization, whatever it may be. The needs are so important. And so I would say, one, it's important to be informed, to be an effective grant maker. And then second, there's often a role that philanthropy can play in sort of testing out interventions that then may prove effective and viable for the public sector to then consider and take up. So there might be something that, again, because of the risk profile of a certain program, like you may not yet know if it's going to work, and so it may not be at a place where I can responsibly put public resources toward it. But if philanthropic partners, community partners came together and said, we're going to try this intervention and we're going to give it, X amount of time. We're going to give it 3 years, let's just say, for this particular thing. And if this proves viable, it has results that we think are positive and effective and worth investing in, then a lot of things like that often then evolve into requests for state resources to continue or to scale a program. And so we see things like that all the time. For example, there's an initiative that we have in our state budget proposal this year to the tune of $300 million called My Kids Back on Track. And this is something that we rolled out first during the pandemic. And it was all about the fact that during COVID, learning was different. And so there was a lot of learning that was on the table that didn't get completed for any number of reasons. And so My Kids Back on Track was designed to empower ed professionals in districts that had plans for how to address this unfinished learning, but a state to support them to fund that, whether that's funded programmatically, funded through hiring more people that could be brought on board to help just like literally staff this work, because it was pretty staff intensive. And so we saw some impact of that. I rolled that out over on the west side at an elementary school in Detroit in 2021. Now, as a result of the initial numbers that we saw, and a lot of that stuff was coming from community partners, now we put a $300 million request in, $50 million specifically for tutoring, for example, because that resource will help us get to a point where we have specific individualized instruction on the table for every Michigan student. When I talked about meeting people where they are, understanding what your needs are so that then they can be met, this program is literally that. And that's an example of something that is kind of bootstrapped, if you will, by outside partners. A concept was proven and demonstrated, and now we want to scale it statewide. That's I think when stuff is happening effectively, or that relationship is happening in the best way, that can be sort of what that cycle can look like. And then you can just rinse, lather, repeat to look at what the next idea is in the next round, the next step. Go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, so kind of going back to Logan's point, because I know sometimes resources are there, but the folks don't know that the resources are there. And for schools that may need more support, that more investment in their education, how are you about funneling those resources to those schools that may need that extra support?
Yeah.
They're aware. They're very...
Yeah, well, let's talk about audience in two different ways. So we say, well, people may not be aware. Well, we need to understand what people we're talking about. So if you're talking about, in an ideal world, everybody would be aware. Community members, parents, students, staff, elected and appointed leaders, everybody would know everything. We would have an information environment where everybody was equal. Obviously, that's not the world that we live in. I think in state government, we have work to do to improve both how we make sure that community members are aware of everything that's happening, what's possible and what's available. And we can continue to do more to make sure that in the context of education, that our education leaders know that. I'd be very disappointed if you told me, and it may be the truth, I'm not going to say that it's not, but I'd be very disappointed to hear that a meaningful fraction of, say, school district leaders or building leaders were not aware what was available to them from the state of Michigan. And that being the case, I think that's both our fault. I think that's our fault and theirs. So I think we have a responsibility to make sure that we are putting things out there, and then folks have a responsibility to make sure that they're taking full advantage of it for the sake of the people they serve, their students. I think our education professionals are working really hard, so we got to make sure that we're putting it someplace that it's easy to get to, that it's easy to digest, because y'all teachers are busy. I'm married to teachers, but they're not really busy. Or your building leaders are too. On the community level, I do think that there's opportunities for us to be better about making sure people know all the resources that are available for them and their families. But one of the ways that, again, for example, the philanthropy sector, the nonprofit sector can help is by being informed, like I said, and then using your credibility you have in the community to communicate. Like, we shouldn't be the only ones that talk about the good stuff that's happening or the things that are available. We need everybody to communicate that in their own voice, with their own networks. And sometimes hearing that information from you is much more authoritative than hearing it from me. As much authority as I like to think that I have, much credibility I like to think I have, I don't have as much credibility in your friend group as you do, or in your neighborhood as you do. And so my job should be to disseminate things to you for then you to disseminate it to others. And that's another way that I think young people uniquely have an opportunity to be impactful, because people listen to y'all differently. Listen to me. You should use that.
We have like 10 minutes left, so I want to just get some questions in here from others.
I was under by the biography to send the email, and I seen you has studied computer engineering at Michigan State and worked for Mark.
Oh, I was in Michigan. Woo! I was in Michigan.
You go to
That's tough.
What role do you see tech played in education, and how can we ensure that all students have access? Well, it's kind of like the same thing. Yeah, have access to those tools as well to succeed in the rapidly evolving digital landscape.
Yeah. So I think I want to talk about access. I'm going to come to that in a second. I think the first and most important thing that we need to both teach and understand about technology is that a lot of this is attitude, a sense of mind. And what I mean by that is there are so many people, young and elders, who are afraid of technology. Now, we say that people fear things they don't understand. Like, that's true. You fear people you don't understand. Like, that's true. But the fear is something that we have to deal with. I was lucky. Okay, my grandma, who was a teacher at Munger Middle School for 33 years, she, for whatever reason, woke up one day and decided her baby needed a computer. Talking about me, okay? And so she decided to get me a computer and got me a computer. And I was little. I was 5. First kid on my block to get one. the reason that mattered, the access was part of it, but the reason that mattered is because it enabled me to develop a level of comfort and confidence with technology, to not be scared of it, to know that I controlled it and I can make it do what I wanted it to do. I think the attitude that we need to work to instill is that technology is something that is ours. Like, technology is something that we control, that doesn't control us. Now, one way you can get there is by making sure that everyone has access to it in their hands. There's a role for the public sector, there's a role for the private sector to play in that. You know, I am leading our state's effort, for example, to make sure everybody is connected to the internet, has a fast internet connection that is reliable, that is robust enough for you to be able to do the things you actually want to do on the internet, like that's not slow, and that's affordable or straight up free. You know, we're putting billions of dollars into that in the state of Michigan. We're going to be the first large state in the country to connect all of our people to the internet over the next 4 years. Having that kind of access is one thing. Then being able to have, frankly, not just one device to use the internet on. Like, I want people to be able to have an experience it on different types of screens, not just a phone screen, but a phone and a tablet and a laptop, a phone and a laptop. Again, because the experience is different across different modes. But the more that you're able to see it, the more we're able to expand what we'll call your digital literacy, to understand how to navigate, how to use the technology, how to control it. It will give you the comfort and confidence for it. I think with that confidence, then that opens up the door to learn more about what to do with it. So for some people, that means learning how to program. That's what it ultimately meant for me. For some people, that means learning how to do things physically with them. For some people, it means I'm not interested in doing anything with it. I just want to understand how it works, which is how we're having a lot. That's how I am with cars. Like, I mean, I don't know how to really fix cars, but like, I understand it enough. Everyone need to have a deep relationship with it. And then as things evolve, and you have that confidence kind of at a base level, as technology evolves, you look at it as a new thing to learn, not as something to be worried about. So, for example, all the conversation right now about...
Can I just interrupt just for a second to tell you that these young people were educating me on all these different tech platforms before you walked in. I think you've got a lot of confidence in tech here. But Freddie, what do you want to know about the digital divide? What does that have to do with like school or different things?
More so, I mean, just digital literacy for real for other people. Because like how we had to kind of inform you on that, you know.
I needed it.
So stuff like that will like teachers be more comfortable seeing them like express things digitally, or like students being able to just use that resource more, and like it not being, I don't know, you have to go to a computer lab or something like that. Like, I don't know, just involve them more.
Bring it more into like the 22nd century. Like really redesign how schools are.
Alert, or yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of just want to bring up that you that you were like in engineering and that you did work at Microsoft. So yeah, that was...
I learned how to code from a teacher who didn't know how to code. Like, she was literally learning it with us. So some of that, so again, attitude. Not afraid to learn it. Not afraid to be embarrassed to get stuff wrong in front of students. Like, that was an education professional that was like, we're going to figure this out together. Even that kind of attitude, that kind of posture towards technology, I think is important. And so, just to finish the thought, I think that working to set that baseline and that kind of practice, making sure people have access to it in their school building and in their homes, then means when you are doing something, when new technology comes in with ChatGPT, you know, these kind of generative AI that we're dealing with now, like when I saw that, I was excited by it, not afraid of it. What now can I do with this? This is a new toy. This is a new thing to figure out, to manipulate, to control, so that maybe we can create some value in it that's different. And I think that's the attitude that we often want everyone to have. So when you have access, when you have affordability, when you have digital literacy, but designed into the system from the beginning for everybody, for their whole lives, then I don't think people are intimidated by it. I think people can make a difference with it.
We have to wrap soon, so I want hands up of who has something that you want to say. We have 2, 3 more. So let's go through and hear what those questions are, and then we can try to respond to them.
Okay. So the city of Detroit has a
well, historically, we had a problem with corruption in our just within our city. And so when we talk about all these resources that are coming into the city, one of my biggest concerns is like, what type of oversight procedures are being put into place by like maybe the state government and local government to make sure that like those resources are allocated to what they need to be. And then my second question that coincides with that, what can we do as not private investigators, but as citizens to keep those people in check and monitor those dollars so they're being spent to do the things that we need them to do?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Well, I don't forget. So I want to. Can I?
Yeah.
I'll be.
Okay.
succinct. So when I came home in 2014, and I worked in city government, I literally wanted to solve that problem about how do people understand what's happening with the government so that they can be more responsive and more accountable. So for me, what that meant was I literally created something called an open data and transparency policy for the city of Detroit. It's called Detroit Go Data, signed by executive order in 2015. Created an open data portal. It's at detroitmi.gov/data. On that site, you can literally see government operations, everything from building and demolition permits to how we, fix fire hydrants and everything in between. It's meant to be a visibility into how the system works that as a citizen you have access to then be able to ask questions about. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't add up. The city budget's on there, all that type of stuff. So I think governments have a responsibility to be more transparent. But then also, you can simply ask questions. Hey, what's happening with that money I heard about? And do that, whether that's at the city council level or being engaged. That's one way you can make that kind of thing happen.
Engagement, coming back to engagement.
Yeah.
So I know for specifically my family, we want to be able to create wealth and to work with our community and do service for our people. So I was wondering, how can we position Black startups to do work with the state?
Oh, I didn't even plant this question. That's great. Okay, so I think this is really, really important. As a kid growing up, I didn't know anybody who was an entrepreneur. I didn't know that was a thing. Like I learned about entrepreneurship in high school, looking at white boys in Silicon Valley, and so I thought businesses just happened. I didn't recognize people started. So one focus of mine is how do we solve some of the big barriers that stand between entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs in particular, and success. And one of those is just straight up access to the money to help your business get started or to help it continue. About a month ago, 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, I launched an initiative called the Michigan Economic Opportunity Fund. It's a $10 million fund that gives grants to businesses that right now cannot qualify for financing of a loan from a bank. It's the state of Michigan putting public money, state money, federal money on the table, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for you to get started with your business. It is focused on Black entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs of color, women, people living with who are differently abled, veterans, people again who traditionally have a harder time getting access to capital. Getting access to capital to start that kind of business or to continue that kind of business or take it to the next level, that is what ultimately will become that wealth engine that employs people in the community, that delivers value to the community, and that ultimately can be passed down to another generation. So that's what we do. It's called Michigan Economic Opportunity Fund. Google that.
We have a few people writing that down. Yeah. I know that we are at time and that we probably have to wrap. I want to just close out, and then if you have a minute to stay for a few more questions. But I just want to close out by thanking you and thanking each of you. This is not the end of this conversation. This is the beginning. We have a lot of other elected officials that have reached out to say that they want to spend time with you guys and talk to you. And also the larger idea behind a lot of what we're doing at Skillman is to have you all in the room, to have conversations, to ask your questions, to be part of the formation of these policy ideas, to push to have them to move through, to work to have them be implemented, and to reject ones that may have happened that you don't agree with. So we need each of you to make Detroit, Michigan, the place that's abundant for all of us. Do you want to close us out with any thoughts?
I appreciate that, and I appreciate everybody's time. As I said, my job is to make it more possible for you to be your best, and everybody you know to be their best. It creates the condition for success. And so in order for me to do that, I need to have the right priorities. In order to have the right priorities, I need to hear from you. Like, I need you to be engaged, like we talked about at the beginning. When I left the private sector to become a community organizer, what I learned in my training was that the people close to the problem are the people close to the solution. People who have the most direct experience have the best insight into how things can be better. And so my job is to be in community, to be all over the place. And that's why I'm on the road all the time, all over Michigan. Yes, I live here in the city, and I go to all 83 counties in Michigan every 2 years. I'm in there all 83 at once. And so it's to hear people, listen to them, and understand what I can do, but I need to know what's important. And so y'all are driving that here, and I appreciate and respect that, admire that, and need it so that I can be successful, but also see be successful. So really thank you for this.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you for joining us.